including as the CFO of Lyondell Chemical Company. After leaving Cal-U, I should mention too that he got his MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, a place known for finance, and had a career remarkable in his experiences. But for any of us who've had a chance to get to know Russ a little bit, it's the reflections that he has about the journey and the lessons and what's important that makes him such an appropriate choice to speak here tonight on what he calls the culture of encouragement. So with that, let me invite our keynote speaker, Russell Young, to the lectern.
Well, good evening. I have to tell you, I'm very honored to be here. It's a tremendous event, and the fact that you asked me to be here, I'm just very, very honored. Tonight, I am going to talk about a culture. It creates success both for an organization and for the individuals in that organization. And I call this a culture of encouragement, which is the header for my speech. I experienced this culture when I was at Cal Lutheran, and precisely at the time I needed it most. And I applied it throughout my career, especially at Lyondell Chemical. Such a culture could be embraced by virtually any organization, whether it be nonprofit or for-profit corporation. But it isn't, because egos get in the way. Human nature causes smart and capable leaders to assume that they are the best decision makers. But that doesn't take advantage of all the talents in the organization, all the brains, all the creativity. It doesn't tap into it all. A favorite boss of mine used to say, you can tell how successful an organization is by observing how well the leaders check their egos at the door, subordinating them to the good of the organization. Tonight, I'm also going to talk about navigating this current challenging job market. In doing so, I'll draw upon my management experience, but equally upon the interaction I have with 18 nephews and nieces, many of whom are the same age as the students here tonight. I'll have specific advice, takeaways, if you will, so students, stay tuned. But first, I'll tell my story. My older brother and I were raised by a single mom who taught kindergarten at Pasadena Christian School. She emphasized the value of a good education. And in high school, I was a good student with good grades. I was expected to go to college like my older brother, but when the time arrived, I really wasn't interested. Basically, I was a wild child of the 60s. I picked bad friends. I made bad choices. I was asked to leave Pasadena City College due to a string of D's, F's, and incompletes. And getting thrown out of a city college is hard to do, but I pulled it off. But just in the nick of time, the light bulb came on. I realized I wanted to live the American dream, and I knew it was impossible on the path I was on. Luckily, my dad had a prior business relationship with Dr. Ray Olson, the second president of this fine university. So with high hopes, I sent in my application. Classes had only been conducted for 7 years, so I was hoping the school was eager for new students. But the admissions office rejected my application. So I had one last card to play. I used my dad's connection to get a personal meeting with Dr. Olson. I can remember that meeting like it was yesterday. When I showed up, it was clear that he had read my file. I pleaded for a chance. He had seen my SAT scores, so they were high. He said, "You're obviously very bright." And I smiled. He said, "But we don't really know if you're ready to buckle down and study, do we?" Long pause, seemed like eternity. He said, "We'll let you enroll in a full class load, but if you're going to need to earn a B or higher in every single class, and if you don't, I don't ever want to see you again." So I signed up for the classes. I got a job sorting mail in the Cal Lutheran mailroom. Then I got a job driving a tow truck on the weekends, 48 hours straight sometimes in that truck. And I didn't get very much sleep, but I did earn some good money to help pay for college. And at school, I got one A after another. I wanted to make up for lost time, so I went year-round, including summers. This is when the Dallas Cowboys were here. I graduated 3 years later with a BA in economics. So Dr. Olson taking a chance on me was a huge gift. It was a life-changing gift. He saw the best in me, and through a tough love approach, he created the environment for me to succeed. When he made his decision, I was a scruffy, long-haired kid with long hair and sideburns down to here, pretty rough around the edges. I was much more streetwise than polished. Who knew that day that Ray Olson was looking at a future chief financial officer of a Fortune 500 company? Not me. But Dr. Olson's vision made all this possible. He provided, through Cal Lutheran, the environment for me to thrive. And Cal Lutheran also provided a second life-changing gift for me in the form of Mark Matthews' mentoring. At the time, he was professor and head of the business and economics department of the school. And he'd already accomplished a lot before he even got to Cal Lutheran. He had worked in the business world, was experienced that way. Then he got his PhD so he could teach at the college level. I look back and see that his business and his academic experience together enabled him to be a superb mentor. I think of him as the gold standard of all mentors. And a visionary. He imagined the value and the power of bringing together students and community leaders. And that's why you're here tonight in this forum. And he also was the perfect person for the financial turnaround of the university, because it was struggling when he became president in 1972, and he did help save the school financially in its darkest financial times and made it this strong college today. As my mentor, he brought a lot to the party. He brought unquestioned integrity, this diverse background in business and in academics. He had highly developed communication skills and analytical skills, but most importantly, he cared. In his interesting classes, I was able to visualize how different world economies worked, and I found it fascinating. And he helped me at a critical time frame my options, given someone with my particular interests. I could imagine, through the discussions with him, what it would be like to join a public accounting firm, or to be a professor of economics at a major university, or to be an economist at a public or private organization, or to be an investment manager or securities analyst on Wall Street, or to be a corporate controller or treasurer. But importantly, he left the decision to me. His mentoring approach reflected the successful culture at Cal Lutheran. It was one of encouragement. His approach appreciated the unique strengths and abilities of each person, and he figured out the best environment for that person to thrive. After graduating from Cal Lutheran and following 2 years of excellent work experience, I next received my MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania as the first Cal Lutheran grad to be admitted there. And if Dr. Olson hadn't given me the chance, I might not have ever made it to Wharton. After B School, I became vice president of a southeastern bank in record time. I was in a hurry. Then I became the treasurer of a medium-sized but struggling company located up the road here in Santa Barbara. But my real break came when I landed at the largest company in Los Angeles, ARCO. Mark Matthews wrote a letter of recommendation that helped me get the job. I used Mark's training in the culture of encouragement at ARCO. Soon after I got to the company, I was given a particularly unique young man to manage. He was fresh out of the Dartmouth MBA program and obviously exceedingly bright. But he came to work dressed like a rebel. The young analyst would sit in his cubicle in a business suit, but he would wear cowboy boots up to here, and he'd wear a bright red Arkansas Razorback hog hat that stuck out to here. So, using the Mark Matthews playbook and recognizing his tremendous potential, I provided broad freedom for him to operate in. In turn, he totally thrived, producing the most conceptual work product I had ever seen. And even his dress code improved over time while I served as a quiet role model for him. The opportunity to supervise another very talented employee arose a few years later, just after I was promoted to assistant treasurer of ARCO. One of my new direct reports was a University of Chicago recent grad MBA, whose important job was to invest short-term hundreds of millions of dollars for ARCO. But he had a few maturity issues, not very surprising given his young age. I wanted to understand him and his job both better, so one day I set the alarm clock for 3:45 a.m. and joined him at work by 5 a.m. You see, the money markets begin trading at 6:30 a.m. on the West Coast, 9:30 on the East Coast. That's when the big banks in New York open their trading and the frantic activity begins. So working together, side by side, he and I each did sizable transactions that morning, many millions of dollars each. His talents were obvious. After that, I substantially increased his trading authority limit in various areas and followed him more from a distance. And I served, again, as a quiet role model for him. His performance never, ever disappointed, and his behavior matured along the way as he thrived. Now, for the past 2 decades, along with his team of subordinates, he has been managing the personal fortune of the wealthiest person in America. So students, here's your first takeaway. My experience with him illustrates that both during college and after you graduate, you may wind up interacting at any time with someone who winds up going to the moon, like my friend. The next ARCO job was as controller of the West Coast operation with all those AM, PM gas stations and the refineries. I replaced a failed controller, failed manager, and I inherited a demoralized group of 130 employees. But using practices I learned from the Grand Master, Mark Matthews, we turned the group around. We created a draft system like you fill jobs in sports, where merit and abilities, not politics or personality, determined who got each job. For years, the president of this operation had been influencing reported income from his division to the headquarters. But shortly after being appointed controller, I held my ground in an executive staff meeting saying, "The number is the number," to the powerful boss. Everyone in the controller's organization knew then that I would stand behind them in reporting the true and accurate earnings. No more games. At our group's next summer picnic, my employees printed softball jerseys for everyone to wear, saying, "The number is the number." And that softball jersey hangs proudly in my closet today. When a manager does not provide the right environment for an individual, the result is failure, not success. One time I had a supervisor at ARCO who was very controlling, even with me. But I require a lot of elbow room. I'm self-driven, and I operate with a very high sense of urgency. He tried to push me even faster, even though I was already running at 120 miles an hour and accomplishing goals in record time. As a result, I got migraine headaches, and I was miserable. The supervisor had failed to create different environments for each of his people, even though we all have different strengths and abilities. It's critical for everyone's success that supervisors do that. After 9 years at ARCO, the company picked me to join another of its operations, Lyondell Chemical. This Houston-based company was in the chemical and the refining businesses. But over the years, Lyondell had struggled and was nearly sold off. But also during that time, the mavericks and the entrepreneurial managers within ARCO were attracted to Lyondell because they found it more invigorating than the old bureaucratic oil company, ARCO. The new management team created a new culture that the employees loved. It was the culture of encouragement. The result was huge organizational success. The value of Lyondell skyrocketed, and ARCO decided to cash out for top dollar with an initial public offering of stock, which is called an IPO. Because of my experience in the capital markets, I was picked by ARCO to be the treasurer of Lyondell and the person on point with the stock offering as well as new debt that we would raise. The IPO was a huge success. ARCO sold 51% of the company, Lyondell, for $1.2 billion, which was a record amount at the time. And a few years later, ARCO sold its remaining 49% and was out completely of ownership of Lyondell. I was promoted to Chief Financial Officer just over 3 years after I joined the team as treasurer. And during my time at the company, various books and publications recognized Lyondell as one of the best managed companies, as well as one of the best companies to work for in the United States. We were a $5 billion company, and we always ranked either number 1 or number 2 out of all the 500 companies in the Fortune 500 in terms of sales per employee. The executive team was deliberately small. This was so we could, as we said, get out of the way and let the employees do their jobs. And every month, the executives held meetings where they met with every employee in the company, discussing developments, taking questions on all topics, no limitation on questions. That degree of openness is rarely found in corporate America. The employees fully participated in decision-making. We operated a number of chemical plants and a huge refinery. In each plant, the most dangerous time is when a plant requires maintenance-related shutdown or restart up. Our approach differed from the industry practice, where typically someone in headquarters would write a big, fat, thick book of rules, send it to the plant, and expect people to follow it. Instead at Lyondell, we had a team of employees, plant employees, and they determined all the procedures. After all, it's the lives of those plant employees that are at risk if something goes wrong, like an explosion. By trusting our employees, we had the safest experience in the entire industry. Families living close to our plants were much safer. And as CFO, I can tell you our insurance costs were the absolute lowest. That's what the right culture can do. At Lyondell, good ideas were celebrated. We rewarded initiative and achievement. We had recognition dinners, not too dissimilar to the setting tonight, where each employee being honored was given a really sizable check for their innovative idea. And the discussion at each dinner table was focused on the employee, not the executives present. After one of those recognition dinners, an employee was energized for life. And we inherited from ARCO an employee annual performance review process, every year reviewing the performance of each employee. And it was a drag on morale. So we rethought the whole thing. And while companies like GE have long touted this practice, in reality, employees can dread it if it involves a forced ranking of employees. Your ranking can mean your career gets stifled, or you can even lose your job. Instead of pay raises being linked to that old annual review, we began paying for the content of the job, not the person in it. We surveyed industry pay rates for every position in the company, and then we paid at a very high percentile, like 90% of the pay range for each job for each person. If you think about it, this eliminates potential bias in pay attributable to gender, ethnicity, politics, or anything else, because you're paying for the job. Instead of the single review meeting, we conducted frequent coaching and goals sessions with every employee. And yes, GE did announce this summer that it is abandoning its annual review process after 40 years, replacing it with a system very similar to what we were doing in the 1990s at Lyondell. And the comment was they want more meaningful, richer conversations with their employees. Good thought. Today, Google is taking the same approach to job pay that Lyondell took in the early 1990s. That is, paying for the job, not for the person. This was clearly the magical time in Lyondell's history. Let's switch gears now. I promised you I would talk about the job market, and my comments will certainly include takeaways for the students. The market is very tough. Budgets are tight everywhere, both in the for-profit and the nonprofit sectors of the economy. Some college majors are well received, but not many. Several of my wonderful nieces and nephews are in college or recent grads, which puts your job concerns right alongside theirs. Their experiences and my management experience combine to give me a perspective that I'll share with you tonight. I expect that unlike the generations before you, college grads will likely not work for a single employer during their career, or even end up working for only a few organizations. The old employment model, where you were hired for life at IBM, is gone. The definition of job has changed. It's a whole different animal now. The churn rate of workers within organizations has been steadily increasing. So, you have to think and act like a free agent. Your career may involve different phases that happen in no particular order. You may be an independent contractor doing project work at one point, perhaps an employee at another point, and the founder of an organization at another point. In such a fluid environment, I have specific points to share with you, but their effectiveness depends upon you implementing two cornerstone principles. You need to take hands-on responsibility for your career. You need to own it. Sitting back is not an option. And you should begin doing this right now. Start tomorrow morning. And because employers have automated or outsourced so many activities, the remaining jobs require that workers engage in what are called soft skills, in addition to their technical skills. Recruiters are actively looking for people who can communicate effectively, can get along well with others, can empathize, and so forth and so forth. Invest in building good interpersonal relationships, starting as a student and throughout your entire career. These soft skills are just as important to the outcome of your career as your technical skills. In a Wall Street Journal survey recently, 900 executives were asked. 92% of them said soft skills are more important than technical skills. 92%. So my particular points tonight are, 1, pick your career based on true passion. I've seen too many middle-aged adults bored with their jobs. Don't be one of them. Life is short. 2, get your hands in your field dirty as soon as possible. I'm talking about internships, project work, and the like. Be aware that an internship has become a prerequisite for a job, and the more internships, the better. Think how well a job interview will go if you can discuss work experiences with the interviewer. And 3, I recommend you pursue all opportunities to interview, including mock interviews. This will increase your odds of success. It will boost your confidence. The skills you develop will be helpful throughout your career. I've done a lot of hiring, and I recommend being totally genuine in an interview. Don't be cautious. Let your passion show. It will differentiate you from the pack and give the interviewer the opportunity to react to your enthusiasm. Describe your unique strengths and abilities and how they could fit into the interviewer's organization. 4, be aware that opportunity can knock at any time. You may be interviewing for a job and not even know it. So use your soft skills at all times. For example, the evening before a day of interviews, I had arrived and checked in the local hotel. I went downstairs to my room to just have a Coke and a quiet moment and relax from the air flight. A well-dressed businessman sat down near me, and we chatted. We had an interesting conversation, and I talked about the Wharton MBA program I was graduating from. Then he said, "Wait a minute. Before we talk anymore, I think I should tell you something. My name is Robin Hinson, and I'm the general counsel of the bank you're interviewing tomorrow." During interviews the next day, it didn't take me long to figure out that Mr. Hinson had passed along his impression of me from our chance encounter. And yes, I got the job. And 5, think of yourself as an evolving brand, one that is distinctive and unique to you. You should work to both enhance and protect your brand. Well, how do you do that? You enhance your brand by adding to your base of experiences and your network of contacts. Throw in the comment from my sister, LinkedIn. I'm sure a lot of you know about that. She touts that as a great way to have network of contacts, and I'm sure there are many others. The schools you attend and the organizations you work with and for are also part of your brand. Whether you're paid, volunteering, what have you, it's all part of your brand. You also need to protect your brand. Recognize that future employers will research social media. So keep that in mind before you post one of those pictures that could cost you a job. So my advice tonight is summarized well by my sister's quote: "You determine on your own merits how the long haul turns out." Let me comment on the elephant in the room. What do you do if you find yourself unemployed or underemployed after graduating? Unfortunately, several of my very talented nieces have experienced this in the last couple of years. One niece, a University of Redlands grad, said to accept a lower level job in your field, then demonstrate your work ethic and your value, and this will help you move up the organization. Another niece, a UC grad, U California, said, take on project work, volunteer in your field. This builds your portfolio, your own brand, until you reach the job you want. Take ownership of your career, was her comment. The boyfriend of this niece developed a creative approach to his challenge of being underemployed after graduation. He used social media to do research about business contacts that were interconnected. First, he landed an internship with one contact. Later on, he got that person to recommend him to another person he longed to work for, knowing all along that they knew each other from his initial research.